Ubuntu is an African philosophy that is ingrained in our way of being, that suggests that you are very mindful the way you interact with fellow human beings. Which means a cow doesn't release all its, Why? Because in the Lekgotla philosophy, we handle complex matter one bit at a time.
Welcome to Inspired Conversations, an inspired leadership podcast where we explore leadership as it is lived, not just as it is taught. This is a space for honest conversations about leadership, culture, systems, identity, and the human experience behind influence and responsibility. In each episode, we engage thoughtful leaders from different walks of life to unpack the tensions, complexities, and realities shaping leaders today in our organizations, our communities, and our society more broadly. I'm Tendai Chitapi, your host. Let's get into today's conversation. My guest today is Sam Tsima, an executive coach, strategic advisor, and leadership practitioner with more than 2 decades of experience across leadership development, transformation, and organizational culture. His work focuses particularly at the intersection of leadership, identity, and African cultural perspectives in shaping people and institutions. Welcome, Sam.
Thank you very much for having me.
So leadership is never culturally neutral. The way we understand authority, accountability, community belonging, and even success is shaped by culture and, in many cases, inherited systems. As leadership conversations continue to evolve globally, I think an important question is emerging, which is what might modern leadership thinking and philosophy still have to learn from African wisdom traditions. And so today's conversation really is an exploration of leadership through a cultural lens where, African traditions help, where tensions might emerge, and how culture continues to shape the way we lead, build organizations, and relate to one another. And thank you for joining me to have this conversation.
Mouthful indeed.
It is a mouthful. And I think maybe let's simplify the entry point for the conversation. When we talk about leadership through an African lens, what are we actually talking about?
We are talking about the African way of engaging with issues around our environment, which could be the community, the organizations, and the society at large. We are talking about its origin and how it has evolved over years and how it actually influences the way we engage with the modern world. Even though we tend to believe that there is a school somewhere where we can go and learn the theories, the principles, the philosophies. But in reality, the schools of leadership shouldn't be the beginning. It should be the place to go and reorientate ourselves and integrate the African philosophies into what is perceived to be the modern leadership principles. So that's really where it should start. Because in African culture, there's no starting point of leadership. The moment you are born, you are given a mentor. You might not call them mentors, but somebody is assigned to you to sort of like guide you through stages of your evolution. And sometimes it happens very early that you have a space open without you being told that now it's your space to move in. Let's say if you are an African child and you are the only boy in the household and the dad passes away, invariably you are expected to step in. And the question is, why is the African culture so trusting of anybody, irrespective of age, that is the identified successor. That means, therefore, leadership starts from the very beginning. You walk along the elder. And that elder could be your father, it could be your uncle, it could be somebody in the village.
Yeah.
But there is always somebody that culturally will be assigned to you. The protocols dictate, and that protocol is cultural. It's not even negotiable. It's not even contested. So the learning from there in terms of the perspectives is very rich. And if you escape the net of leadership development, it's very difficult to come back into it. That's why they never even give you a chance. Through so many cultural initiatives or rituals, you even yourself, you just find yourself in a leadership. The concept of the child of the village is the school of African leadership, or the child of the community, where everybody is entrusted with the responsibility to show you the way.
That's so rich. I am just reflecting as you were setting that context and perspective, that at its core, this idea that leadership begins the moment you are born. It's quite I think, for many, potentially a very challenging idea, because we have been over-conditioned to understand leadership as authority and position and age and experience. And for me, this conversation is very interesting, because I think from some previous conversations we've had, I've come to be more curious and more questioning around that intersection between culture and leadership thinking, particularly in the modern age. When you talk about the child being a product of the village and these structures and systems that exist in, what we would call largely African sort of contexts, one word that immediately I think would come to the mind of many is Ubuntu. And how it informs, I think, relational leadership. Now, Ubuntu is often quoted, but really deeply explored. And so I guess my next inquiry would be, what does Ubuntu actually demand of a leader?
Ubuntu is an African philosophy that is ingrained in our way of being, that suggests that you are very mindful the way you interact with fellow human beings, the way you treat each other, the way you relate. You could be relating to a fellow human being from a different perspective. But from a leadership point of view, it suggests that you don't force your way into me. You first recognized me, that I exist and who I am because of who you are, before we even go into the responsibility of leading. So it's a principle, basically. It conscientizes you of very fundamental things that you must inform. Either you are thinking around me, or how you engage me, and for what reason, and what impact you want to leave with me. So if I'm a young person and you want to expose me to a good way of leading, you're obviously not necessarily going to give me the context that is much more complex to me. You're going to give me the context that I understand. If I'm a designated leader, like I grew up in Skukune with a young boy that just came to be part of us, little did I know that that boy is actually a king from the village where he came from. And he was sent to our side to be away from disruptions of shaping him up. But when he came over and became part of us, he was allowed to be a boy like us. I never knew until later in my life I found out that, this gentleman was brought to us to be taken care of and be given a space to be a child, away from distraction of being too early designated and identified as a future leader, and be rushed into responsibilities, into context that will disrupt that nurturing. So the Ubuntu starts there, that if somebody is a designate to become a leader, you take care of that person. You make sure that does not lose their youth just because it's going to be a leader. It's almost like incubation. And what do we do very wrong because of rush and desire to be led by somebody that is by blood designate to become a leader? We rush them in, but you haven't really prepared them. So even in companies, if somebody is designated to become a successor is on a succession list, that is the most person to be taken care of, and that is the most person to be allowed to evolve. And then Ubuntu is actually saying to you that you have a responsibility of stewardship. Because this is the person that is going to be carrying huge responsibilities in the future. Your responsibility as somebody that is actually developing this leader has to have that context in mind, that consciousness, that the outcome of this is going to be how you actually have nurtured this person. That is Ubuntu. A lot of us, we talk about Ubuntu, but we find difficulty in actually applying it and really truly living it and experiencing it in our system. It's very hard, and many Western countries might have taken so much out of Africa, but one thing they can never take is this philosophy that is ingrained in our being. And the only people that can actually package it for the rest of the world is us. That's why I'm preoccupied with Lekgotla philosophy of African facilitation, learning and development. Because I don't deal with it from having read it in a book. I deal with it from it being ingrained in me and having seen it being practiced. But within the Lekgotla philosophy, there's a lot of Ubuntu. So if you like, in a Lekgotla, you'll find a clue, which is Ubuntu. Because a Lekgotla is a methodology. But that methodology, it cannot be applied raw as it is. It needs a Ubuntu inside it. When you walk into a circle and people are sitting there and you don't belong to this clan, you walk there and you stand up, and most likely a member of the clan will recognize you and come forward to you and say, Tendai Chitapi, you are welcome, take a seat. And you will probably sit next to him and you will say, they're holding a process here. Sit down, I will introduce you. You don't walk in there and become unrecognized. Siyabona, we see you. Welcome. And then what he will do, he will then tell the next door person and say, and Tendai Chitapi is greedy. Everybody hears you, but the protocol is such that you can't disrupt and say, I know Tendai Chitapi. No. Because we are first introducing and then tell Pasha that Wauba says hi. And then Pasha will tell Mwatu. Mwatu will tell the other person. And when they finish there next to him, then the last one will say, Awa, we welcome him. And then the system goes past and then comes to me and say, they're saying you are welcome. That is a recognition. Only after that may you then take off your jacket and feel welcome. That is Ubuntu in terms of how you induct somebody into a circle that is not part of you. It might be a gathering because of a wedding, because of a funeral, or because indeed they are actually engaged in a Lekgotla that is intended to resolve a leadership crisis. When you come there, they don't say you are invading. They know there must be somebody that has invited you.
Yeah.
And you will know if the issues are really such that you can't come in. You wouldn't come. Nobody will come without actually having a context.
Yes.
So Ubuntu also suggests that get involved once you have understood the context and respect the protocols.
Yes.
And then you will be welcome. And when you welcome and you feel welcome, you can be part of us. But we have recognized that you are a human being. You need to be recognized. You need to be welcome. You need to be made feel at home. And then after the greetings, we offer you whatever we are eating. Because a guest, the best way of welcoming a guest after introduction is to offer them whatever we are eating.
Yes.
Now think of that in a boardroom welcoming a guest speaker to come in. I mean, I watch a sit-in boardroom, we sit in a Lekgotla way, and you see how haphazardly we welcome people that we have invited to come and give us an address. We don't make them feel welcome. We feel like they are coming over now to tell us everything about our being here.
Yes.
And that is not Ubuntu. That philosophy, if you go to the modern ways of looking at it, comparing it with Time to Think by Nancy Klein, you'll find so many principles in the 10 principles of time to think.
Yes.
One by one, actually in my Lekgotla manual, I refer to it. One by one, there's nothing of those you will not find in a Lekgotla philosophy. They are there. If you go into World Café, methodology that is used to hold complex conversations, you go through the principles of the World Café. Every one of those, you find them in a Lekgotla.
Yeah.
If you go into brainstorming, where we generate ideas, Lekgotla principles about that, because sometimes we come into Lekgotla to think through a very complex situation, and then you hear them say, this matter is so complex that it needs, in my language, men in jackets and women in their blankets to come and really resolve this complex thing.
Yes, yes.
And it needs a Lekgotla. Why? Because in a Lekgotla philosophy, we handle complex matter one bit at a time until we have actually, all of us, chipped in and we have digested everything, and we are convinced that we could actually walk towards a consensus. And there's no dry run or rehearsal of it. It is there. It is just accessed through the chair, where if it is in the royal house or the royal palace, the chair in many cases is His Majesty or Her Majesty.
Yes.
Right? But when you walk in there, you only if you know who the Majesty and His Majesty is. Only at the end when he sums up, you realize, oh, this is Induna or the king. You have in a boardroom, again, how we run meetings. Actually, all those principles are there. It's just that we call them something else in a modern system. But if you were to look into the Lekgotla philosophy, you have them there. We say a chair doesn't really occupy the conversation. You are a chair, please give us a space to contribute. And sometimes you will fight over it. You have dominant chairperson. In Lekgotla, the philosophy itself will just humble you. You don't even have to struggle with occupying that, because, and if you go in a more structured Lekgotla where we use then the king's traditional walking stick, it'll be there next to you. You only talk if you have that in your hand. So there's no contestation for space, and you only access that indu if you really feel moved to talk. And in the talking, you can't introduce a new topic unless you have processed the previous person's point. You don't walk away from previous person's point because you have a new point to raise. No.
Yes,
you need to reflect so that we can close that input. And then when you bring your own input, you are guaranteed that you have 99.9% attention of everybody minus you. And when everybody knows that when we move from Tendai Tsima's point, he's either going to have closed it or we're going to close it and then we bring a related issue. So that's why sometimes you find in Lekgotla, His Majesty or the chairperson sitting there not really talking because the process is so much following the philosophies that there's no need. And you also know very well that you don't overindulge in Lekgotla. There is that understanding that everybody has time to chip in, and you know, in the African Sepedi language, the discipline comes with the saying that which means a cow doesn't release all its, so they don't say it all. You have enough time can come back and finish. So you these are guardrails that are very cultural, that are very traditional, that like you will know yourself. Because the level of consciousness in the Lekgotla philosophy is very high, and it gets developed so young in your life that actually it becomes your brand and your identity of how you behave in a team situation, right? Because we don't just call Lekgotla, we call it Lekgotla when there's a serious matter or there is a important get together. It's not a place that you'll find people doing anything else other than what is actually done there. The mere fact that you have called a city, called a Lekgotla, very much like in a company when a CEO call a board, call an exco meeting or a chairman call a board meeting. By virtue of that nature of that thing, it demands you to know how a team member behaves in that type of a calling. The rules are very clear. And in a clearness by protocols. And the space is sacrosanct. Whoever is on the floor is highly respected, highly listened to by everybody, fully, attentively, and the matter being raised will be processed accordingly. Give me any other so-called modern and Western leadership development setup that can give you that richness today. Yes, I mentioned a couple of them, but even those, you will struggle, and they will tell you that if you adopt this philosophy of leadership in this company, we are going to have to change manage, and so that everybody can apply it.
Yes.
And there's no guarantee that you will arrive at that high level of discipline. And yet we have been convinced to walk away from this philosophy. No wonder we have so much dilemmas in leadership because we don't have the anchor. Yeah. One of the favorite books I like reading on management is Stephen Covey's principles of, what do you call it?
The 7 habits.
The 7 habits of highly effective people.
Yes.
I like it because if you really develop affinity with those principles, it's like self-check. But as I say, we have it in an African Lekgotla methodology. We must just reach it enrich it. And I have written a manual on that. I use it for leadership development interventions. And before I can even make people assemble to discuss a particular thing, I take them through the whole manual because it's very intense. I mean, before COVID, we used to meet once a Saturday, spend the whole day together in a hotel here in Campton Park. And you experience it once, you will not want to miss it. And that is what we managed to do, having observed that we package it into a manual. And we always take people on a breakaway. And we said, we're going to make you experience this. And we will even give you a particular topic so that you tackle that topic with that principle and see its application in resolving a matter. So that is where you find the intersection between the Lekgotla philosophy and the Ubuntu concept.
Yes.
As I said to you, the Ubuntu is a glue that binds us because it deals a lot with how we think, how we relate, how we behave, and how we recognize and respect fellow human beings.
Yes. And thank you so much for that, I think, very comprehensive thesis, I would call it, on the Lekgotla as a leadership practice and model. You've outlined, and I think I've understood, how Ubuntu differs from what we might argue is the modern leadership thinking, which is very performance-driven and very transactional. And it almost feels like when you enter into the Ubuntu mindset, the Lekgotla model, it slows down the pace of discourse. You know, you've referenced the 7 Habits, Time to Think. I think those are frameworks that have been put into place, I think, but they capture something which is inherent in our tradition and culture, African perspective. And that's quite interesting to me. Question I'd have is, do you think that organizations really can genuinely operate from principles of humanity and dignity and belonging and still remain commercially effective?
Absolutely. We are not prescribing the Ubuntu philosophy and the Lekgotla African facilitation, learning and development methodology for every situation. As you know, leadership is situational. You can rush members of your team into action, still holding in the background the philosophy and the principle of Ubuntu and the Lekgotla. It does not mean that in the royal house where it is applied quite a lot, there are no emergencies. I've seen Lekgotla held in an emergency situation where, in growing up in a village, a young man stabbed another man with a knife. And then they go, in the olden days, they will call you to a disciplinary hearing. And that needs to be resolved because this is not acceptable behavior. And this is too urgent to be too relaxed on it. Within one day, you resolve that matter. Within 1 hour, you resolve that matter. But you still apply the Ubuntu and the Lekgotla philosophy. So people always say the African principles don't recognize a sense of agency, are not outcome oriented. It's not true. You're applying them wrongly.
Yeah, that's right. And I think as you are saying that, I've come to see that the Lekgotla, which is often, treated as a cultural or ceremonial practice, actually has got a very sophisticated and almost, a very deep wisdom for leadership and governance. You've outlined some of the leadership behaviors that arise in the Lekgotla setting. And I think some principles that modern organizations can learn from this very sort of reflective, consensus-driven type of setting. I
mean, just to show you how naive sometimes we are to to think that maybe naive is the wrong way. How less respecting we are. Take another principle or another philosophy that is led by the Conscious Leadership Group. They've got 15 commitments to self-consciousness or the conscious leadership. Those 15 commitments towards conscious leadership, you can't apply them all at once. They are there for you to access them when the situation demands. So within Lekgotla, there are certain principles you may need them in certain situations. So it's not a hammer that you can hit every nail you come across. It's the application.
Yes.
It's just additional to your toolbox of leadership. Obviously, if I'm leading a multinational company with diverse group of people from all over the world, I'm going to borrow what I need from that tool back of Lekgotla when I feel I need it. If I go and meet a colleague in Botswana, and I'm from South Africa and from the Bapedi side or the Lesotho side, there's a lot of commonalities there. In Botswana, they call it Lekgotla. We call it Lekgotla. But also be aware that Lekgotla itself refers to a meeting. I'm not talking about the meeting. I'm talking about the philosophy. So some people call a meeting that we have a Lekgotla. They're not necessarily applying the Lekgotla philosophy.
Right.
They are having a meeting, they just decided to call it a Lekgotla.
Yes.
Like the Americans will call a meeting a town hall. Right? So when somebody say, I'm having Lekgotla, you need to stop them and say, are you referring to the Lekgotla, the meeting? Or are you referring to a meeting where you are going to apply the Lekgotla philosophy? I don't know whether when the government say we have a government cabinet Lekgotla, whether they are referring to the meeting, they just call it Lekgotla, or whether they are going to apply Lekgotla philosophy in a cabinet meeting.
Yes.
Because it will be very fascinating to see, especially now with the government of national unity, how you then embrace other cultures in that government of national unity. Because the Ubuntu then suggests that don't impose yourself onto other people.
Yes.
If you want them to be like you, you're going to have to take them along. And that process of taking them along suggests that you have to, the Ubuntu philosophy will suggest that you have to respect their culture first before you can actually tell them about your culture. It's going to be quite another process of consciousness, which now brings the issues of the modern diversity, equity and inclusion and belonging.
Absolutely. Yes.
So even within the Lekgotla philosophy, the methodology and the Ubuntu philosophy, there's that highest level of recognition of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging.
Yeah.
Because even among ourselves, Africans, when we meet, we are very diverse. Even in the Bapedi themselves, there's the Bapedi from Sekhukhune and the Bapedi from the other side of the Olifants River. We are different. But our Ubuntu philosophy say when we meet, we recognize each other because we are all human.
And I think, what I've understood really quite starkly and quite strongly in this conversation is that all these models and frameworks, some of which you have alluded to, I think in terms of the time to think framework in particular, this idea of equality is foundational. That in the Lekgotla philosophy, hierarchies are broken down.
Yeah.
We come into the space with an equal right to participate and belong in the conversation.
Yeah. Then see them how then they elevate who is designated leader when they come to then finality of the process.
Yes.
Because every decision that Kate taken, it's only signed off by the leader, right? And that sign off is carried by the team. And then they'll say, now we have really now satisfied ourselves. And this is the decision we are suggesting. We hand it over to you to make a ruling.
Yeah.
And that ruling is not necessarily different from what they agreed on, because in a Lekgotla philosophy, we reach consensus. Yeah. We reach a decision by consensus. And if there's a different opinion, we might have to delay the chairman's ruling of the decision. Or we might say that we agreed to take this decision, we still have reservations, we'll come back to it.
Yes. And I think what is so interesting for me is this provides a introduction to what culturally grounded African leadership can look like. I mean, without becoming anti-Western or without romanticizing it, just, I think, owning who we are. I guess I've got one maybe penultimate question. And I think we probably need to meet again or more regularly, because I think this is such a fascinating exploration into this cultural influence on leadership thinking. In your view, what kind of leadership will Africa need over the next 2, 3, 4 decades?
We have it. There are similarities among African countries in this continent around these issues. It's unbelievable. We tend to think that because of the labels that were given to these various countries by whoever gave them makes us different. In my days in the corporate world, I used to be the head of HR for Motorola Africa. And I had colleagues in Nigeria, I had colleagues in East Africa, I had colleagues here in Southern Africa. When I was in downtown Lagos, and I sit with people and we're eating in a restaurant, you will struggle to actually recognize that I'm not a Nigerian. Because working in a multinational organization, part of my job was actually being aware of the cultural differences. And as the HR, head of HR, you are consciously facilitating the existence of all these cultures. And it's very difficult for people even to single you out and say you are a South African, because of the level of consciousness of culture, which we will call cultural intelligence. The same way you have emotional intelligence, you have to have a cultural intelligence to function in a multinational organization. Yeah. That cultural intelligence is a consciousness, is an intentionality in you. So the best leadership is you first deal with yourself first before you can lead other people. So you need to deal with ourselves as Africans first and identify the fact that we are the same, except that we have different cultural perspectives, which are very rich when you consciously and culturally, intentionally put them in one pot and see them as actually originating from the same source. What we call Ubuntu in South Africa is called something else in Ghana, or something else in the Arab world, or something else in the Western world. It's just that we have the so-called authors of these philosophies who ever managed to assert themselves and convince the whole world, and then we all start following that. Yeah. I remember the GC guy that came up with the forced ranking in the 90s when I was in corporate. And everybody in the world now wanted to do forced ranking when they do performance management. And some of the countries and companies couldn't make it because that we lost the context of what cultural perspective this person had when he decided that this is, sometimes it's not even cultural perspective, maybe not cultural from the community of people, but cultural from a company. What issues were they grappling with when they came up with forced ranking? It worked for them, but it doesn't mean that it will work for everybody else.
Yes.
Now, what works for Africa needs to be informed by the African context. And the regional context of Africa, I don't think we have differences in Southern Africa. If you look at it, we have interacted so much that it's very easy for South Africa, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Mozambique, and others to actually have a regional context towards leadership that is informed multiplicity of cultures. But the leaders are going to have to be intentional about it. It doesn't mean that you're going to force the whole country the whole company to have the same thinking as you. You need to hold the space for cultures to help you migrate from monoculture into multiculture.
Yes.
And that is the most difficult thing for many leaders to facilitate. Take football. These days, you don't find one football club made up of one nationality.
Yeah.
What do you think happens in those organizations? Take Springboks. If people are not allowed to assert themselves from their own cultural perspectives, it's very difficult for them to become a team, irrespective of the talents they have. So leadership is everything we need. But everything we need is inside us. We must first recognize who we are and allow who we are to inform how we lead. And then have a responsibility of custodianship. The problem is people take over, and when they leave, they destroy what they took over, and they left nothing for the next generation. And that responsibility is what actually needs to be reinstilled. We took over this country from whoever was before us. What did we add, and what are we leaving behind?
Yes. I want to just sort of, as we wrap up this conversation, you have touched on so many important and complex, I think, areas of misunderstanding about what we might call African wisdom traditions. And I think, again, as I mentioned, we will probably need to have a deeper dive or some kind of a series around this. But my closing question would be, with all that you have outlined, the context you've presented, the tensions and the complexities we are experiencing and seeing locally, globally around leadership, and with a particular view on the African context as you have sort of painted it, what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is that for the first time in so many years, we are able to relate and interact. Remember, those who sought to change the course for Africa understood very well that if you allow Africans to become one, nobody can stop them in the world. And we are still today tested by this because the borders were created for us not to get together. But the borders now are built inside our psyche because there's no longer anybody stopping us to go in. We have got AU, we have got so many activities that bring us together. I mean, last night we watched the Café final. The whole continent was one.
Yeah.
And we were celebrating the beauty of African football. But when we then go into our own little corners, we go back into the borders inside our minds. And then it's going to take a long time to destroy the psychological borders inside our minds. But what gives me hope is that technology, the activities that are taking place in the whole continent, over time, we are going to actually achieve a point where we reach a groundswell. It's no longer going to be frowned upon when somebody says, look, I'm doing business in Ghana, I'm doing business there. It will happen, but it needs work in our own small spaces. Genuine work, not the concept of authenticity. When somebody's authentic and they are authentic, you can bank on them. And when people are not authentic, they're just wanting to become politically correct. So that tells me that we have a long way to go in terms of developing ourselves. One of the courses that I'm facilitating for UCT is called Creating People-Centric Organization. We also have to create people-centric communities, people-centric countries. It was a joy for me to see the state visit by South Africa to Botswana last week. And what they found of the energy was just amazing. And I said, why can't we do it with Zimbabwe? Can't do it with Mozambique? These things are not going to happen by sitting us wishing things. We need to literally to see our leaders crossing borders and going to see to discuss.
Yes.
because we have talked enough in Africa. We have done very little. We need to really practically do things and to have that desire for Africa to become what we want it to become. But it doesn't only require leadership at the government level. It requires leadership at individual level.
Yeah.
You know, how come that we are comfortable with engaging with cultures outside Africa because we're working for these global multinationals, but we are uncomfortable to unpack our very own? There is something psyche that we need to sort out.
Yes.
In fact, we should be the one welcoming the world into us to see us how together here at home in Africa we do it. I'm privileged to be an executive coach. I coach across the globe, across the world. I mean, I'm coaching somebody now in Maldives. And the first 2 sessions were very difficult because we had to work through the culture of his and mine. And ultimately, when we connected, it flies.
Yes.
The same must happen. People must take it upon themselves to understand how a fellow brother in Mozambique functions and how I function and how we can function together. Yeah. That conscious, don't be destabilized by the immigration problems that we have. The whole world has experienced it. People's migration is always moving from the point of scarcity to a point of abundance. So where we have the point of abundance, we must manage. We mustn't say we are invaded. We must manage how people come here to access what they see we're having.
Yeah. And I think on that note, I think you have given us food for thought that we have a duty to embody this Lekgotla philosophy. And that's really, I think, all we have time for today. Sam, thank you so much for joining me today for this really important and illuminating conversation. Thank you for your insights and perspectives.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm grateful because it is my call and my calling to embed the African Lekgotla methodology to be one of those many out there that we use in leading our lives and our organizations. So it's a continuation of an ongoing journey.
Wonderful. No, thank you so much for your time. And thank you to all our followers and listeners. Until next time, stay inspired.